and welcome to KUYA podcast. I know you might be surprised to say, why are we doing the program in English? But after doing 3-4 episodes in this season 3, we've received questions from our viewers and we just want to respond to those questions. And as usual, you're with me, Rachel Mohango. Welcome to the program. Today, like I've mentioned, we just want to respond to questions, and I have Dr. McBride Nkalamba, who is going to expand on some of the issues that you, our viewers, have actually raised. Dr. Nkalamba, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rachel, and I would like to thank our viewers for giving us the feedback and the questions.
I'm actually happy that people are following and people are asking questions, and actually others are asking if we can have subtitles on our KUYA podcast so that we actually reach out to a wider audience, and hence the decision for us to have this conversation in English. And the first question that I have is coming from Baba Yaga. He's one of our viewers, and he just wants to understand issues in regards to intra-party democracy. We've had conversations, and you actually expounded more in relation to intra-party democracy, but they want to understand the implications of intra-party democracy into a broader political context.
No, thank you, Rachel. Firstly, I think it's important to understand that when we opted as a country in 1993 through a referendum that we were migrating to political pluralism and a multi-party system, it meant that we needed to define political organizations in the context of democracy. Of course, we had a one-party state, which means that there was one political party. But now that we have several political parties that are contesting for power, we needed to define the political organization, which is the political party, in a democratic context. And what that meant is that we needed to have political organizations that they themselves were democratic, because there is no logic in having a political organization that is not democratic, and yet it pronounces that it is being established to advance democracy or to advance the democratic culture. So intra-party democracy is actually the bedrock of the entire political system, because it starts within the party, that a political party must have the same principles that are espoused at a national level in terms of the political system. In our case, it is a democratic political system. Intra-party democracy means a number of things. Firstly, it means that that party is open to membership. It's not restrictive. It's very defined criteria for membership, of course, with conditions. Secondly, that party is open to contestation. People will compete for positions within the party, and that the process through which they compete for these positions is clear. It's also important to understand that a democratic party or inter-party democracy is defined by a constitution, that there must be a constitution. The party must have a constitution that makes these provisions, that has these provisions, and defines the character of that political organization based on democracy. Importantly, it's the practice, because a lot of political parties have a constitution and have these pronouncements, but when you come to the practice, these political organizations conduct themselves differently. There's marginalization of membership, there's marginalization of people in certain positions, marginalization of certain groups. Others popularly referred to or mentioned women, young people, sometimes even ethnic groups. And all these things in terms of practice, all these habits, I'm calling them habits because they're not constitutional based. These practices are the issues that we examine when we're talking about intra-party democracy. Now, to come to the question, what are the implications? Clearly, when you have democracy within a political organization, it is the character that that political organization takes into government. So when that organization is elected into office, it becomes an administration, it cannot conduct itself as different from its own character. Its character is democratic. So it means that by implication, when you have intra-party democracy, you have increased the probability of having a democratic culture in your political system and in the way politics is conducted throughout the country. So that's very important. But it's also a question of attitudes. People or members of a political organization which is democratic will find it extremely contradictory and internally conflicted within themselves to conduct themselves otherwise. Because that culture, in terms of how they orchestrate politics, within their political party or political organization is exactly how they are going to expect that they are going to orchestrate politics at the national level, national politics, where the different political organizations are competing. Currently, I can confirm to you that there are initiatives across the continent, actually, where they're looking at advancing intra-party democratic governance, meaning that they are looking at establishing common standards, principles being given of what a democracy is, but common standards in terms of how a political organization should be run. But all this is only possible when you revisit the Political Parties Registration and Regulation Act, the necessary chapter, and look at what are the requirements for a political organization to be registered within its constitution. So it's going further to look at what political parties provide in their constitutions in terms of the democracy or democratic action within that political organization. So I think as a country, obviously, we need to examine that, look at what is provided in the laws. Are there provisions that encourage democracy within the political organization? This is happening throughout the entire continent. So the implications, as I've mentioned, are straightforward.
So you've talked about political parties having their own constitutions and also their own processes and what government requires them to have as they're going for the registration. So does government really conduct some checks and balances before actually assenting to say this political party can be formed?
Absolutely.
Can register?
Absolutely. Within the law, the institutions that are tasked with that, the registrar of political parties does that. But it's also important to know that even when you look at the political party conventions that have just taken place and will continue to take place, you will see that the institution that's responsible for conducting those elections is the Malawi Electoral Commission. So this is a government entity that understands the basic tenets, the basic principles and processes that safeguard democratic elections. And so they make sure that and ensure that within every party, as they hold their convention, that process is undertaken in a democratic manner, democratically. So yes, government does provide those guarantees, firstly, during the due diligence process at registration to examine whether that party has met the requirements. And I think, and if not, it's necessary that they examine the constitution to see and to ensure that it's a democratic constitution, and then during elections.
Okay, so actually that response takes me to the next question asked by Chuck Mwale. The way he's asking his question, I believe it's because of what we have seen in the convention and what has happened in other political parties where other leadership roles actually were unopposed. Where do we place democracy in such political parties?
I think it's given to all of us that the key features of a democracy is competition and choice. And any practice that diminishes these aspects, competition and choice, is going to be considered as less democratic than otherwise. Even if this scenario pertains legally, meaning that there is no legal contestation as to what has happened, or there's no contradiction in the constitution, but people expect that when they go to a convention, a party convention, for instance, there is competition for a position, because it's the competition that gives them the full realization of their right to a choice. So in that respect, you would argue that this is a bit less than is expected in a democracy. In countries like the United States and other countries, you know that within the political party, there are presidential debates. There's a Republican debate. I think the Democrats also have their debates. And all this is important because it allows the members of the party to appreciate what their candidate is interested in achieving. Because political rallies is a one-way track. You go to a group of people who are not going to ask you a question. You stand there in front of them. You talk, you make pronouncements, and you leave. A political debate, a presidential debate, a vice presidential debate allows you to be questioned by your competitors, within the party, if it is at the party level. Of course, at the national level, it's between parties. So all these dynamics are things that we should consider as a country, that for certain positions, there must necessarily be a debate. It must be, it may not be legislated, it may not be in the law, but there must be provisions that allow that there's contestation so people have a choice, informed choice about the candidate. It's a very important office.
Is it one of the provisions that Malawians need in the grassroots, in the rural areas, when they're selecting delegates to represent them at the convention?
I'm not sure that that dynamic can go to that level, to that extent that they will have debates, but I think there must be platforms where people can examine a candidate and interrogate a candidate beyond the pronouncement a candidate makes just standing on a podium and speaking unchallenged. The debates are very important. The town hall meetings at that level, the level of constituencies may be relevant. But for national politics, as a party, political party, I think that presidential debates are a necessity. Yeah.
All right. So another viewer, Davy Moyo-Sakuwa, still on the same intra-party issues, but his question is based on what we have seen so far, where leaders of party are being endorsed and issues of delegates receiving handouts. So you actually expounded in one of the programs regarding the handouts. Maybe you can just respond, because his worry is maybe that actually affects the votes, in a sense that in order to vote in favor of those who gives, it does not affect our democracy.
I think that parties have provisions in their constitutions that disallow these practices, that you can actually give out money, handouts to candidates during conventions, so that they are in your favor. I think the provisions that make sense in a democracy is that as a political organization, anyone who is interested in the welfare of the delegates, because let's face it, these delegates need money. When they come to the conventions, they have expenditures, they have places, they have to find accommodation, food, and the rest of it. I think it's possible for the political parties to have provisions that anyone who wants to contribute to the cost of the convention can actually remit to the party without pronouncing that this candidate has done A, B, C, D. The reason why some individuals argue that, no, I'm simply helping delegates because they're not sponsored by the party, because they will incur costs and they need upkeep. It's simple. A party can simply have provisions that anyone who would like to contribute to the upkeep of delegates at the convention or a party meeting should pay into the party coffers, and then the party will manage that resource on behalf to avoid this chronism, this patronage, because it is what it is. And I think in a democracy, it's unfortunate to be that crude and that unsophisticated about buying, so to speak, votes, because there's only one real interpretation about why anyone would give a delegate money. It's not because they need a hotel, but it's because you want to personalize your support for your personal benefit. Monetize your support.
Still on the same, as you're saying, to say buying votes, I think he still has a question saying it has been discovered that those who do not have the financial muscle find it difficult to win a position in a political party. So what can be done to ensure that there's a fair ground, that everybody who is participating, everybody who thinks they can actually get a position in a political party should be given an opportunity, whether with finances or not?
Money is always going to be a factor in politics.
Okay.
At a national level, at a party level, globally, money is a factor. Globally, countries that have more money have a lot of influence. Now, what is important is that our party financing laws should be prudent, and they should be nuanced, meaning they should actually pay attention to all the challenges that emerge from the practice of using money in politics and mitigate and prevent those practices. So we have to focus on the party financing laws. This has been mentioned several times. Some of the practices have to be criminalized because actually that's what they are. People do not make political choices on the basis of someone's financial status in society or economic status. They should be making political choices based on pronouncements in terms of policy, in terms of convictions and other things as well. So that is something that as a country, Malawi needs to pay attention to. And this is not going to happen by itself. Our citizens must demand it. Special interest groups, or what we call NGOs, must actually demand it. They must revisit our laws, look at party financing laws, and demand that those changes be made. Other than that, people always use money. At the same time, I think countries also put a minimum benchmark in some societies that if you want to run for president, you can't be bankrupt, or you have to have a certain amount of money, net worth, so to speak. And this is important because you don't want to be destitute financially, to be too needy financially, and then you run for certain office where you can actually be compromised, easily compromised, because you are destitute financially. Common language, broke, so to speak, that you are sniffing for the next cent you can get. So you must be reasonably comfortable to be able to run for certain high office, accomplished to a degree in terms of your finances, your assets. Yeah.
But we've seen even those that have been, that actually look that they're financially comfortable, but still more when they get into power. That greediness, you still find it, you still see it.
Yes, it's a human vice.
So how should we say that this is something that would actually guide?
The cutoff point.
Yeah, a cutoff
it's
point.
the price you go at, the price a person goes at. If you are completely broke, you can be bought for 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, just argument's sake. But if you have your own resources, the price is higher. And the higher the price at which you go, I think that safeguards a certain number of interests. While this practice is not to be condoned by any measure, but I think for you to be confident about what you are going to do, to have focus, to focus on the issues that matter, to focus on policy that you want to pursue, to focus on ideals, aspirations, to focus on how you're going to orchestrate your politics, you need to have a certain degree of financial responsibility. That's what it says, financial security. And that is a prerequisite for anyone who is contesting for such high office. There's so many pressures. You can't start off from a point of disadvantage of your own circumstances, that you do not have the finances at all to maintain and sustain yourself. I think that's the reality of politics at that level.
That takes me to our next question in relation to presidential powers. In one of the podcasts, we were talking about presidential powers, what the Constitution defines presidential powers, and, you know, if at all there are limits. So this question says, what role do political parties and opposition groups, civil society organizations play in checking presidential authority powers and mandate?
That's the most important aspect of the checks within the state. You have heard of the 3 arms of government, and the others will tell you, or others will now posit that there is a 4th arm of the state, the media. But within the dynamic of the state, within the dynamic of politics, non-state institutions, civil society, faith-based organizations, cooperatives, unions, all these are very important in influencing government policy, in influencing laws, and in influencing practice and behavior. So the question of the limits of presidential powers is embedded in the Constitution through these arrangements. But in the case that a leader has pronounced that they would want to limit, to reduce the president's powers or the powers of the president, that is an issue for the assembly. This originates in the assembly. It's a motion through the assembly that comes from the assembly, and thereafter, of course, through parliamentary process, due parliamentary process, ends up with the president as a bill to accent to and amend the act that is seen to have given the president these powers, these expanded powers or unwarranted powers, so to speak. So this question, to answer it simply, the assembly, the representatives of the citizens that have determined the president has too much powers have to table the issue in parliament. I think there are a number of motions, private members' motion and whatever, that they would use. I don't think, well, government business, maybe, but I would think private members' motion, they can table that and say, no, we had these pronouncements during campaign period, and we think that we should revisit the powers of the president as regards A, B, C, D, E. And after due parliamentary process, the bill is taken to the president then accents to it, and those powers are reduced. I'm not sure which powers were in question.
There are several powers, but Chris Gia here just wanted, maybe before we go to the examples of the powers, he would like to understand why presidential candidates would actually say during campaigns and all that, to say, when I get to power, I'll reduce presidential powers. And then when they get to the presidency, most of them do the opposite, contrary to what they say.
A couple of possibilities. When they get into office, they realize they need the powers.
Okay.
That they do not have as much leverage or control or influence on the political system, on the bureaucracy, that's the civil service and government, on the economy. And then they resolve that they need these powers, and therefore it is pointless for them to actually reduce the powers. Some will even think that they need more powers than actually prescribed in the Constitution. There's a lot of, and I'll use this term, there's a lot of fantasy that a president has absolute powers. It's not the case. To influence an institution, a bureaucracy, right from the political party, most presidents are presidents of their own political party, to the executive, which is the government, the bureaucracy, the civil service, public institutions, and other accountability institutions, the legislature itself, where you have so many parties, and then to go into the economy, where there are a lot of private actors who are making independent decisions, is not a simple affair for someone who is ultimately responsible for national affairs. This is why I would imagine a president would look at the powers accorded and simply make the conclusion that there is no point to reduce them.
Okay.
I would imagine that, unless you specify to me which powers are in question with the specifics. That's my general answer.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we conclude today's edition of KUYA podcast, where we were just responding to some of the questions that you sent through our social media pages. We'll be having these sessions once here and there, just to ensure that we are also expanding on some of the issues that you want us to clarify. Until next time, my name is Rachel Mohammed. Thank you.
Leo mwe ndugu pweteka. Karibu. Eziko mzee.
Karibu.
Karibu.
Hii amali, karibu.
Makai, Memo, karibu.
Karibu.
Stay connected and share love this festive season with Go TV. Go TV. Love it.